visited these charitable institutions, he would make a point of arriving on foot. As wealthy as he was worth $50 million when he died in 1920. He said it was just unbecoming of someone to sort of show up in a carriage or a motor car. Mm-hmm. So he had a very large ego. A lot of Russian Jews resented him because he came off as imperious and autocratic, very stereotypically German. But at the end of the day, he gave away at least half of his wealth to Jewish enterprises. He even tried to establish a Jewish settlement in Galveston, Texas. That actually did not work out so well because not enough Jews wanted to come to Galveston. He felt that too many Jews were settling in Philadelphia and New York. Okay. And he felt that we need to spread Jews out throughout the country.
Okay, all right.
But he was
that in a desire to in reaction to rising anti-Semitism?
That he actually felt that. He felt that there was a reaction to there was anti-Semitism in places like New York because of the concentrations of Jews in the Lower East Side. And if you read Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives, which came out in 1891, where he visits the tenements of the Lower East Side, Jacob Riis says some very nasty things about Jews. He basically says, look at how they're living. Yeah. Money is their god. All they care about is making money, and how can they live in such squalid situations? And there was this interesting thing where the progressive movement at that time was very it was for bigger government, it was for increased regulations, but also among the reformers you had people like Jacob Riis who were openly anti-Semitic. So that was a contradiction.
Yeah. My understanding, too, is that from having read other books, is that there was kind of a big divide between the more successful Jewish immigrants, especially, middle and upper class ones from Germany, and those who came from other countries, and they were kind of like looked down upon in that same way. They almost adopted that same anti-Semitism in themselves because they were viewed as of a lower class, quote unquote.
Yes, there was a lot of tension between the Russian Jews and the German Jews. The German Jews had joined the country in the 1840s, 1850s, and had become pretty successful. And they spoke German at home. They had German nannies. They often went to Germany for vacation. They felt culturally German. Mm-hmm. And something they were very proud of. Unfortunately, in Germany, on the right wing of the political spectrum, there are a lot of people who are feeling, well, these are not Germans, they're just Jews who speak German. So they were not as accepted as they thought they were. Right. And the Russian Jews resented them because they felt they were being talked down to. And a lot of Russian Jews tended to be politically much further left. They tended to especially the secular ones who came over from Russia, tended to embrace socialism, and the German Jews felt this was totally unacceptable. So there's this weird tension between the two communities, even though they were united by religion.
I'm curious about J.P. Morgan, because as you mentioned, he was tremendously anti-Semitic, and yet he basically helped to create the system for which many Jews came to the United States and settled and were ultimately successful. Did he have any thoughts before the end of his life about having that illuminated that contradiction at all?
J.P. Morgan was not someone of many words. He's been written about quite brilliantly by Gene Strauss and Ron Chernow, but he was not someone who really put his feelings down on paper. Yeah. I will say that he was tremendously humbled in his attempt to buy up every transatlantic line when he bought up the White Star Line in 1902, and his company invested funds in building 3 superliners to outdo what Albert Ballin was building for Hamburg America Line, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. Right. And the Titanic, the second of those sisters, in 1912 met an infamous end, and J.P. Morgan canceled his trip on the last minute because he wanted to spend some more time with his mistress in France. And
right, but what, Isidore and Ida Strauss both perished on that journey.
Yeah, there's a misconception that sailing the Titanic was a big media deal. It really wasn't. It was the second of three sisters, and she was only half full when she left. If she had been fully booked, it would have been an absolute, even worse catastrophe.
No.
But Isidor and Ida Strauss were German Jews who had immigrated to the United States. He was co-owner of Macy's department store, and he was offered a place in the boat, in one of the all too few lifeboats. And he said, "No, I'm an old man. I let the younger men go before me." And then Ida Strauss refused to leave him, saying famously, "We have lived together for many years, Isidore. Where you go, I go. So we have lived, so we will die together." And they perished, and they became martyrs of both the Russian and the German Jewish communities.
Yeah. What was it? What were the forces that eventually shut off this pipeline that closed the door to opportunity, or at least severely circumscribed it, in the United States?
Well, there was a backlash starting in the 1890s with a small group of Bostonian New Yorkers in academia and in high society who began buying into something today known as scientific racism or eugenics. It was something that started off in Germany and France and then came over to the United States. And the founders of the Immigration Restriction League, most notably Prescott Farnsworth Hall, who was one of many wealthy, non-practicing lawyers who founded this organization, felt that they looked over at what was going on the north side of Beacon Hill in Boston or the Lower East Side, and like, oh my God, these people are, they're not going to make it in this country. They are poor. They bring over diseases. They are going to, quote unquote, pollute the genetic stock of this country if they start interbreeding with the people already here.
To turn a current phrase, poison the blood.
It echoes, it's a very chilling echo.
Yeah.
And these are people who had immense power and wealth. We're talking about professors at elite universities. We're talking about people with a lot of money also. And it started off as an elite movement, but they were very well funded, well organized. And by the 1910s, it had worked its way into popular culture, into newspapers. And the start of World War I produced a tremendous backlash against immigration. And then in 1916, one member of the Immigration Restriction League, Madison Grant, wrote a book called The Passing of the Great Race, which was basically total nonsense, pseudoscience. The guy was a lawyer. He had no business writing about anthropology. But he said there are three races, the Nordics, the Mediterraneans, and the Alpines.
Yeah.
And if the Alpines and the Mediterraneans intermingle too much with the Nordics, the world is going to go to pot. And this became very popular. And by 1922-23, the American Congress basically slammed the door shut on immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe. And these restrictions remained in place until 1965. And by extension, these restrictions condemned millions of people to death in Hitler's gas chambers.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see how the shape of the world would have been different had that not been the case. Had that escape valve actually been still open for a longer period of time, because you think about the implications of that and how many people could have gotten out before Hitler even came to power. What do you think we can learn? I mean, you've already we both alluded to some of the modern echoes of anti-immigrant sentiment, and also I know that, of course, we have the war in Ukraine and circumstances in Europe. In many Eastern European countries, anti-Semitism is rising, as it is in many places around the world, and circumstances that are causing folks again to be on the move and seek out more peaceful and greener pastures. What do you think that we can learn from this period of history?
Well, I think that this is, it's very troubling to see echoes of pre-World War I happening now. This was the era before pre-World War I. There was sort of this, at least among the upper crust of Europe and America, the sense of oh, history is settled. It's all, you know,
The end of history, yes.
The end of history. All the imperial families are related. The British Empire and everything. It's going to go on forever. And I think we've had a similar sense of hubris over the past 20 years with the Pax Americana. And I think that with America, we're really at a testing point right now of our, not just our founding ideals, which have never been fully enacted, but they're there. And also the post-Civil War idea of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments,
yes,
which guaranteed equal rights to people regardless of their race. And if America ceases to be a republic and we fall back into authoritarianism, which has tragically governed most of human history, authoritarianism, absolute monarchy, dictatorships, tribal fights, it's going to be a dark world. Yeah. And I think that there are lots of people in the world, which is growing increasingly unstable, who still hope to see America as a place of refuge where they could achieve their full potential. It never always works out as smoothly as you want to. Just looking at first-generation immigrants, those first generations had it very hard. They still do. Yeah. And they sacrifice everything for that second and third generation, as our grandparents did. And I remember the famous writer Peter Hamill, who died several years ago, I believe, he was an Irish-American writer. This applies to all immigrants. He said, my father came over from Belfast, Ireland. He lost a leg. He was working one of these horrible jobs in New York, these dirty, awful jobs. And big guy, he didn't mess with a guy like that. But at night, I remember hearing him in the other room sobbing.
Yeah.
And he says, think of what these people gave up to come here. They often not just sacrificed their families and their lives back at home, but they sacrificed their bodies so that their children could have a better life. And if we lose that, we're going to be in a dark place.
Isn't it amazing how we are able, with the passage of history, and perhaps because the immigrants at that time, looked a little bit more like we do, that we're able to say, unlike many people did at that time, that this was a wonderful thing, and I was descended from that person, and they were struggling, and yet so many of us look towards the southern border and see a threat to the economy, a threat to our security, and want to build a wall at the southern border. And it seems like 100 years ago or more they would have tried to build a wall around New York Harbor or something like that, and yet we're repeating our history again. I suppose we have to hope that as the lights went out across Europe, as Lord Grey said at the beginning of World War I, that the lights don't go out in the United States of America, which is something that I could envision happening under circumstances which seem to be borne out by public opinion polling. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and let's keep engaged, and let's remember our history. Steven Ujifusa, he is the author of The Last Ships from Hamburg, Business, Rivalry, and the Race to Save Russia's Jews on the Eve of World War I. Thank you so much for writing this book. It's a really important period of history, and I appreciate you coming to speak with us about it on Facepalm America.
Thank you so much, Beowulf.
I want to thank Ace Elson and Rosabelle Hine for being the producers of this program. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to encourage you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever platform allows you to do so. Tell a friend about this show. Again, we're at facepalmamerica.com. And until next time, enjoy the day.